On July 6, 1959, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake struck the state of California. It was one of the most powerful earthquakes to ever hit the West Coast, and even though it happened over 60 years ago, it's still considered the largest earthquake in the region's recorded history. That is, of course, unless you count the big one that scientists believe is just waiting to happen on the San Andreas Fault. But how much should we be worried about this big one? Is it really out to get us? And if so, are we on the brink of its happening right now? Let's take a look at what the experts have to say. The San Andreas Fault is a transform boundary between the North American and Pacific plates that stretches roughly 800 miles along the western side of California. As the name suggests, the fault line runs through the middle of the San Andreas Mountains, which are named after the fault line itself. However, the fault actually extends well beyond the boundaries of the mountain range and passes directly beneath several major cities, including Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Francisco. This means that when the two plates slip past each other along the fault line, it can cause some serious damage. In fact, that's what happened back in 1959 when a magnitude 7.8 earthquake struck near the town of Coyote, California. In total, the earthquake lasted about 15 minutes, consisting of 4 main shocks and thousands of smaller aftershocks. Most of the damage was concentrated in the small towns near the epicenter, but the entire state of California felt the quake. Even people as far away as Las Vegas and Denver reported feeling the ground shake beneath their feet. Altogether, the earthquake caused an estimated $27 million worth of damage, which is equivalent to around $240 million today. But perhaps even more concerning than the cost of the damage was the number of casualties. In total, 12 people lost their lives as a result of the earthquake. These deaths were primarily caused by the collapse of buildings and other structures, as well as the rupture of gas mains, which caused fires to break out across the city. In the aftermath of the disaster, many people began to wonder if California was due for an even bigger earthquake. After all, the San Andreas Fault is capable of producing magnitudes of up to 8.2 or higher, so it was only a matter of time before the big one hit. But before we move on, be sure to give this video a like. If you do enjoy learning about the science behind earthquakes and other natural disasters, then be sure to stay tuned, because there's plenty more where this came from. As it turns out, the 1959 earthquake was caused by the sudden release of energy that had been building up along the San Andreas Fault for decades. This built-up stress is released in the form of seismic waves that travel through the Earth's crust, which we know today as an earthquake. Before the 1959 earthquake, the Pacific plate had been moving to the west relative to the North American plate. This means that it was sliding past the other plate towards the west coast of the United States. However, the movement of these two plates is not smooth and constant. Instead, it occurs in fits and starts along the San Andreas Fault, which can cause stress to build up in the rocks. Eventually, the stress becomes too great, and the rocks break suddenly, releasing all of the pent-up energy in the form of an earthquake. This is exactly what happened in 1959 when the western section of the San Andreas Fault ruptured near Coyote, California. The rupture caused the land to shake violently for about 15 minutes, and it was felt as far away as Mexico and Nevada. But while the 1959 earthquake was certainly powerful, it was nothing compared to the big one that is lurking just below the surface of California. The big one refers to a potential mega-earthquake that could strike along the southern section of the San Andreas Fault. Scientists estimate that this earthquake could be anywhere from a magnitude 7.8 to 8.2, making it one of the largest earthquakes in recorded history. The reason why the San Andreas Fault is capable of producing such large earthquakes is because of the immense amount of stress that has been building up along the fault line over the past several million years. As the Pacific plate continues to move to the west, it drags with it the entire western half of North America. This includes the Rocky Mountains, the Great Plains, and the entire west coast of the United States. The resistance of these massive land masses causes the stress along the San Andreas Fault to increase until it is eventually released in the form of an earthquake. So when will this big one hit? Well, no one knows for sure. But scientists do have a few clues that may help us predict when it will occur. One of the most important things to understand about the San Andreas Fault is that it does not rupture all at once. Instead, different sections of the fault rupture at different times, which creates what is known as a creeping section of the fault. A creeping section of the fault is an area where the two plates are moving past each other without any sudden release of energy. This is in contrast to a locked section of the fault, which is an area where the two plates are stuck against each other and stress is building up. By studying the creeping and locked sections of the fault, scientists can get a better understanding of where the next big earthquake is likely to occur. One study published in 2015 used GPS data to monitor the movement of the two plates along the San Andreas Fault. The study found that the eastern section of the fault in Southern California was creeping, while the central section was locked. This suggests that the next big earthquake will likely occur along the locked section of the fault. Another study published in 2017 used a technique known as paleoseismology to study the history of earthquakes along the San Andreas Fault. Paleoseismology is the study of past earthquakes, and it involves examining the geologic record to determine the size and frequency of past earthquakes. This study found that the southern section of the San Andreas Fault produces large earthquakes every 100 to 300 years. The last big earthquake along this section of the fault occurred in 1690, which suggests that we are overdue for another one. In addition to these studies, there are also some more anecdotal evidence that we are approaching the next big earthquake. For example, there have been an unusually high number of foreshocks and aftershocks along the San Andreas Fault in recent years. Foreshocks are small earthquakes that occur before a larger earthquake, while aftershocks are small earthquakes that occur after a larger earthquake. An increase in the number of foreshocks and aftershocks along the San Andreas Fault could be an indication that the stress along the fault line is increasing and that a large earthquake is imminent. Another piece of anecdotal evidence is the fact that the San Andreas Fault is becoming more active during droughts. During a drought, the amount of water in the pores of the rocks along the fault line decreases. This decrease in pore water pressure reduces the friction between the two plates, which allows them to slip past each other more easily. This could potentially lead to a large earthquake along the San Andreas Fault. So are we on the brink of the next big earthquake? There is no easy answer to this question, and scientists are still studying the San Andreas Fault to better understand the risk of a major earthquake. However, the evidence is clear that California is overdue for a big one, and when it hits, it will cause catastrophic damage. According to the California Institute of Technology, a magnitude 7.8 earthquake on the southern San Andreas Fault would cause severe damage in urban areas such as Los Angeles and San Diego. The earthquake would likely cause widespread damage to buildings, bridges, and other infrastructure, resulting in significant loss of life and property. In addition, the earthquake would cause widespread power outages and disrupt essential services such as water, gas, and electricity. In the aftermath of the earthquake, there would be a tremendous need for medical care, as hospitals would be overwhelmed with casualties. The earthquake would also cause major disruptions to transportation networks, making it difficult for emergency responders to reach those in need. The economic impact of a major earthquake on the San Andreas Fault would be devastating. The cost of rebuilding infrastructure and the loss of life and productivity would likely cost billions of dollars. In addition, the earthquake would likely have a major impact on the insurance industry and could potentially trigger a global economic crisis. It's important to note that the impact of a major earthquake on the San Andreas Fault would not just be felt in California, but would likely have repercussions throughout the entire United States. The economic impact alone could trigger a recession or even a depression, and the loss of life and destruction of property could have major political ramifications. In conclusion, the San Andreas Fault is a ticking time bomb that could go off at any time. While scientists are still working to better understand the risk of a major earthquake, it is clear that California is overdue for a big one. When it hits, it will cause catastrophic damage and disruption to our daily lives. The good news is that there are things that we can do to prepare for the inevitable earthquake. By taking steps now to secure our homes and businesses and develop a plan for what to do in the aftermath of an earthquake, we can mitigate the damage and get back on our feet more quickly. A major earthquake on the San Andreas Fault would be a devastating event, but it is something that we can prepare for and recover from. All right, now it's time to make your voice heard. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on what we should do as a society to better prepare for earthquakes and other natural disasters. We live in a world that's constantly changing and evolving, and it's important that we stay ahead of the curve. Whether it's advancements in technology, shifts in the global economy, or changes in consumer behavior, there's a lot to keep track of. That's why it's so important to have someone on your side that can help you make sense of it all and provide insights into what's happening and what might happen next. And that's where I come in. My goal is to be your trusted advisor, your guide through the complexities of our ever-changing world. I want to empower you with the knowledge and insights you need to make informed decisions and stay ahead of the pack. Thanks for watching.